Welcome, everyone. Very glad to be part of today's webinar, which is part of the series, as you all know, Just Energy Transition in the Western Balkans and Ukraine. And it's organized, of course, by the Initiative for Coal Regions in Transition in Western Balkans and Ukraine. We are in the middle of the webinar series. Today is the fourth webinar, and I will be your hostess not only today, but on the fifth and the sixth webinar as well. For those of you who don't know me, my name is Sonia Risteska. I am a Senior Manager Business and Development for Eastern Europe. I work for a German-based renewable developer, a company called Green Enesis, and responsible for developing the solar markets in the region, actually in the Balkans. Today, I will be supported by the great colleagues from the initiative, who I will name later, but now I will basically go to the housekeeping rules, so you're all aware of what is going to happen today. You probably already know that the webinar will be recorded, and of course it's only view only for you. But of course you can always use the chat options as you probably already did in the previous webinars, especially because of course the idea is not only for you to hear the presentations, but for you to also ask questions, and we're really looking forward to your questions during the presentations. But of course the questions will be answered at the end, but I will come back to the agenda later. Anyways, just to say, please feel free to use the chat and introduce yourself. Of course, we know who is asking the questions. If you have any technical issues, please send us an email to the initiative email. I will just put it now in the chat. So in case you don't know the email, you are aware who you can reach out to. Yes, to go back to the agenda, we really have a great lineup today, and a very interesting topic that I'm going to come back later to. But now I would actually like to continue with asking you some questions first. And if you haven't done so yet, please open the Slido, so www.slido.com, and enter hashtag WBUE or scan the QR code. So I will also put this actually in the chat in case somebody can't access it. And you will see some questions there. The first questions is, of course, we would like to know where do you come from? Because of course the webinars and the initiative is for the entire region of Western Balkans, but it's not only limited to that region. So we would like to hear, where are you actually coming from? There it is. Oh, nice. So we have Serbia, we have Switzerland, Norway, Poland, Bosnia, Ukraine, Slovenia. Oh, quite a lot from Bosnia. Good. Germany. Yeah, even the US. Nice. Albania, Austria. Quite nice representation. Of Europe, I would say. And I can see that the most co-dependent countries are quite nicely represented there. So this is good. Yeah, we will slowly be wrapping up then this question. And or this inquiry, I would say. And we can go to the other questions. Okay, so next is what, according to you, should be the main sources of funding for energy transition projects? So yeah. Oh, I see quite evenly distributed opinions here. Okay, I can see that, yeah, the combination of all types of funding will probably be necessary. and a race for the second place between state funding and private finance. I don't see any other answers coming in. So yeah, maybe we can wrap this up. Yeah, quite interesting. And I believe that if I didn't vote, but if I would have voted, I would have voted combination of the above. So yeah, we will discuss the answers and the question later with our great panelists as well. So maybe we can go then to the next question, which is regarding the carbon border adjustment mechanism. And what kind of an influence, according to you, will it have on the countries which want to join the EU but are not in the EU still? Yeah, okay, I think it's this one was pretty easy and pretty anonymous, I would say. Yes, I mean, it's good to see that, yeah, any sort of, I would say, additional taxes and levies on dirty fuels would actually facilitate the energy transition, and we are agreeing with that. Of course, this is also another question that the panelists can pick it up later and we can discuss it in more details. Yeah, okay, so yeah, I think it's already the time to pass on to our, let's say, first impulse giver. And I can't see if she has her camera on. Yes, she has it. So I am delighted to present our, let's say, the first speaker today, Alessandra Giacobbi. Sorry if I mispronounced your name again, but she will, okay, first maybe to give a bit of your background, an environmental economist with more than 20 years of experience in research and policy domains, heads the connectivity, climate change and European team of DG NEAR, and previously coordinated the EU team, which was dealing with international climate change negotiations on adaptations and loss and damage, as well as adaptation issues in least developed country in DG Klima. I would say quite an important and very, very interesting topic. So Alessandra, you don't have slides, but please, the floor is yours for your statement.
Thank you very much, Sonia, for this introduction and, of course, for this invitation to what promises to be an extremely interesting webinar. So also on my behalf and on behalf of the Commission, welcome to all participants. It's very reassuring to see so many of you listening to us today and exchanging with us on the just transition in your regions and on the instruments that we have available at our disposal. It's my pleasure to say a few words of introduction to this very important topic, which is indeed crucial, before my colleagues and fellow speakers will really dive into the subject matter, and hopefully we will have time for a fruitful discussion at the end of the various presentation. I think it's clear that addressing the issue of financing opportunities is at the core of the matter on how we can turn into reality the just and green energy transition through our joint efforts. As you know, of course, the Green Deal has a just transition as one of its core pillars, and the European Green Deal is the blueprint for the economic policies of the European Union since 2019. And this is a very important aspect. The European Green Deal is not only about climate policies. It is not about environmental policies. It is really about our economic and social agendas. And I think it's quite interesting to see that the European Green Deal has been so resilient in the face of multiple crises that have hit us since 2019, the COVID-19 pandemic, of course, but also Russia's unprovoked and unjustified war of aggression against Ukraine and the subsequent weaponization of energy. And in fact, it is the energy crisis that we are facing now, even though it is slowly subsiding, that has made our lives challenging and difficult for citizens in particular, but also for businesses, of course. The uncertainty that has surrounded the energy sector for the past year and a half or so has or could have led to questioning or, whether the green transition, in particular for the energy sector, is really the right goal for us to pursue. And I think there is no doubt about the answer, and it's quite clear across the board. Accelerating the clean transition in the energy sector and diversifying supply of energy is really the only feasible answer and the only feasible option we have to move forward. The war of aggression against Ukraine has made it really quite clear. We have to even accelerate how we move forward in the energy sector, reshape our systems so a greener and more sustainable and diversified future. And that's really the only way forward. So we cannot really, of course, we will have to take, and we have taken immediate short-term measure to face, in particular, the price hike and the crunch in the supply of energy, but we cannot forget the long-term goal of decarbonizing our economies, starting from the energy sectors. I think this pathway has really been demonstrated as the most robust solution in the face of multiple crises, soaring fossil fuel prices, the war, dependencies on specific inputs and goods. And now more than ever, we see the need to increase and diversify our energy mix toward more renewable, but of course also to invest substantially in energy efficiency. For us, it remains crucial as European Union, jointly with our partners, in particular in the neighborhood and enlargement regions, to continue engaging on the just and clean transition. And this is one of the concepts that's really enshrined in the economic and investment plans that we have developed for the Eastern Partnership and the Western Balkans. And of course, it's part of the key political commitments that the leaders of the regions have taken in the Western Balkans in the context of the Sofia Declaration, the action plan on the green agenda for the region. But of course, this continued commitment is demonstrated every day by the government of Ukraine, even through these very difficult and challenging times. How do we really turn this commitment into reality is really the thrust of the matter. And that's what we are looking at today while addressing the issue of financing opportunities. And this is certainly a necessary but not sufficient condition for the just transition. In addition to finances, of course, we need to continue keeping this political commitment, but we also need the political leaders to have courage to take decisions that can challenge and will challenge the status quo while being ready to ensure that no one is left behind, hence the importance of the just transition. We need a good conductive regulatory environment that will allow all actors, whether public or private, whether national or regional, to play the crucial role that they have to play. And we do need a comprehensive approach, one that looks at energy, industry, households, businesses, environment, and climate, all at the same time, maximizing the synergies and minimizing the trade-offs. And we need a suite of tools, and I'm very glad that at the beginning of this meeting, through the Slido questions, you also, or most of you saw the carbon border adjustment mechanism as one of the tools that can indeed accelerate such a clean transition in the energy sector. And indeed, the carbon border adjustment mechanism is not directed at any country in particular, but it's really directed at the embedded carbon content of imported products to the EU in some sectors to start with. And that's why we are really strongly believing, and I think most of you are in agreement, that the carbon border adjustment mechanism will encourage third country producers to reduce the carbon content of their products, including pushing for a reform of the energy sector as energy and the energy mix really counts in terms of the carbon content of products. The lower the carbon content, the lower the price will be paid, and this will be a substantial reward for companies whose products have a low carbon content. And that's why we're hoping that in this way we will be able to accelerate the just transition within the EU and outside of the EU. So as a last comment, of course, we do need to make sure that we are able to mobilize sufficient financial resources, but we also need to make sure that all financial flows that we have at our disposals jointly are actually working in the direction of the green transition and are fully in line with the Paris Agreement. So before I give back the floor and we can start really going into the subject matter with the next speakers and really unpack a bit the issue around mobilizing financial resources, I just want to conclude by stressing that achieving the just transition in the energy sector and more broadly may indeed be costly, but the cost of inaction, of course, is even higher. And we see every day the impact that climate change, biodiversity loss, environmental pollution are already living throughout the region. And I mean real social and economic impacts. If we think about air quality, for instance, it's quite clear that the health implication and the health associated costs are really extremely high. And we do need to tackle this issue head on. So it's also clear, of course, and I'm sure you will all agree with me that we cannot have a transition if such transition is not fair and is not just. If it doesn't pay attention to regions, to industries, to workers and communities and families who do face the greatest challenges as we prepare for being fit for a new future. In the EU, many regions have indeed started this reflection, in particular regions that are heavily dependent on coal. And I know there have been several exchanges also in the context of the Coal Region in Transition initiatives. And so it is quite helpful and great that we have this opportunity to continue exchanging on how things can be done in practice. And we as the European Union, of course, stand ready to support and along the way, in particular through our economic investment plans, which are our long-term strategy to help recovery and integration between the EU and our neighbors. So I just want to encourage you to make the most of these opportunities that are available through the EIPs, and colleagues after me will talk about that a bit more. So with that, I hand the floor back to you, Sonia, and thank you very much.
Thank you, Alessandra. That was really a great introduction already. And especially the last part that you were saying regarding not only mobilizing finances, but actually using properly the finance that is already there and making it, the transition, making it equitable and just and for everybody. It's basically, I think, that the most important thing that we will also dwell on with our great speakers. So yes, as you all heard, today's topic is about financing the energy transition and how to develop proper project proposals, what can attract funding, what kind of funding, what are the opportunities out there, and we will hear reflections, lessons learned from not only from the Commission side, but also I would say from North Hungary as well. So from a region that is already going through these processes, and to do so, we really have a great lineup of speakers. I also have to say kudos to the organizers for getting a really a good lineup of just like women talking about energy transition and financing. I'm really happy to see that today. So yes, we will hear more from Judith Gyori, from Magdalena Kuneva, and from Shusha Piškoti-Kovač on the topics today. And not to hold you any longer, Judith will be the first speaker. She's the project economist with a large experience in international cooperation, project development. She's the program manager for the Western Balkans regional programs and in economic and investment plan unit at DG NIR. And she specializes in blended finance, I would say very current topic that is being discussed quite a lot lately. Yes, so yeah, she has a quite, I would say, professional interest in the Western Balkans region because she was previously also living here, specifically in Montenegro. So yes, Judith, the floor is yours. You also have a presentation, and you will of course talk more about the Western Balkans investment framework financing opportunities. So yes, because we are already a bit late, I would just say to be pretty strict with your allocated time. So thank you again, and the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, and good afternoon from my side as well. Can we switch to the next slide? I will try to be fast. I have prepared a couple of slides, but the participants will receive after the meeting, so you will have time, even if today I will be I will try to be efficient with the time. So first I will just mention about the energy support package, which is quite recent, and it is a big support package to the region. Then I will present more in details the WBIF, the main channel to finance energy transition investments in the Western Balkans through IPA funds. And then I will also quickly present a couple of regional programs outside of the WBIF work, which are also targeting this very important topic. Please, next slide. One more. So just to put it in the big context, we have IPA 3 since 2021, and under this instrument, 14.1 billion euros are set aside for the Western Balkans. Of course, not everything for energy and just transition, but the major window allocated, where the most of these EU funds are allocated, is actually window 3, with 42% of the 14 billion. And this will go to green agenda and sustainable connectivity investments. So there is a big importance on this topic. And it is also reflected in the allocations for the current MFF. Next slide, please. So as I mentioned, in November last year, the President of the Commission announced a big support package for the Western Balkans. It was a 1 billion package for energy support, and it has two main components. One is a budget support component for 500 million, and most of this support is already dispersed to the beneficiaries, because the idea with this budget support was that it should tackle the immediate needs arising because of the current energy crisis. So most of this fund is already dispersed to the beneficiaries, but apart from this, there was another component for another 500 million through the WBIF, which actually finances investments, concrete infrastructure projects, and I will present those a bit later. Next slide, please. So yes, this is again the WBIF component of the energy support package. It provides investment grants to the regional energy efficiency program. This is a program which is ongoing for some time now, and I will have a slide on that. But it also included investment grant support to infrastructure projects, as gas, electricity interconnectors, but also, and very importantly, renewable energy generation projects as well. And it also included the guarantees, which you will hear about later on today. Next slide, please. So the WBIF, this is a blended platform which started in 2009. So, and since then we developed quite to a big investment framework targeting the Western Balkans region. Since 2015, also private sector projects are under the WBIF. The first idea was to focus on infrastructure, public blending, but now we also cover the private sector. And what is really important now, it is that WBIF became the main delivery channel of the EIP, the Economic and Investment Plan for the Western Balkans, the major plan, which sets the targets and objectives for the Western Balkans regional development for the upcoming period. Next slide, please. So just very shortly the past, so far in the previous period under IPA 2, we focused on connectivity, and most of the projects were actually back then in transport sector, but there were already a couple of energy investments as well, and they were mostly grid sections in the Western Balkans connecting the transmission lines in the region. This was still a smaller envelope comparing to the current envelope that we will have under IPA 3, but already almost 100 million EU grant already went to concrete infrastructure proposals. Next slide, please. So now we are in EIP times, and it started in 2021. So we switched from connectivity and we opened up WBIF also to different other sectors, environment and climate, very importantly, and digital future, private sector, and human capital as well. So now more and more projects are eligible, which is also important for the just transition perspective. And since 2021, actually 40 flagships were already endorsed, and you will see them in the next slide. Yes, so this is probably not so visible, but actually 13 projects targets the clean energy sector. And as you see on the list, we are not much more diverse now with our portfolio than back in the connectivity agenda times. We have several renewable energy projects which will help the decarbonization process. And we also we continue the support to the regional energy efficiency program. In the next slides, you will see the project examples, these 12 infrastructures which received in the last 2 years the EIP grant support. And you see there are many solar photovoltaic power plants, but also hydropower plant rehabilitation in Albania. And on the next slide, there will be also photos of wind power project, wind parks, and still we are there with the Trans-Balkan corridor as well, so electricity transmission continues. You will find more information on these projects regarding the grant size and also the total cost and the lead IFIs who are helping us to implement these proposals on the next slide. Because I forgot to mention, but the idea with the WBIF is indeed this is a blending platform. So we work together with the international financial institutions, in particular EBRD, EIB, World Bank, Agence Française de Développement, KfW, and the Council of Europe Development Bank. They are the lead financial institutions, and they provide loans to the projects where the Commission and the EU provides the grant element. So this is how our blending platform works. These are indeed the EIP flagships so far endorsed, but of course this is a project list which is continuously growing, and we will hopefully add new projects to this list in June after the next WBIF board meeting. Next slide, please. And I forgot to mention that it's not just infrastructure investment grants that what we finance with WBIF, but also project preparation. Because this is very important as well, that the projects reach the necessary maturity level before they are presented to the WBIF. So any type of feasibility studies, designs, preliminary design, detailed design, technical assistance for project preparation, but also for implementation is also eligible under WBIF. We have several TA grants approved, and these are just the most recent ones which are relevant for energy transition. Next slide, please. And one of the channels under WBIF. Yes, we will send the presentation after, I understood, but the colleagues will give information on that. Yes, so there is the Regional Energy Efficiency Program, which started a couple of years ago. And through this program, we also work with the EBRD and KfW, and we provide financing to energy efficiency measures in the building sector, because as you are aware, in the Western Balkans, that is also something that needs improvement. So municipal sector, but also residential sector is eligible for these grants channeled through the REAP. And since inception, the Commission the EU already provided more than 180 million EU grants to this energy efficiency program. Next slide, please. This is just the overview of what I'm presented right now. So we have the TA over 61 million since inception. We have investment grants, and we also have the REIT. These numbers are specifically for the energy sector. So really the projects that are relevant for our topic right today. Next slide, please. Yes, EFSD Plus. This is a topic that will be discussed right after my presentation, so I am not detailing it, but this is a new financing instrument, the guarantee, which works in a bit different way, but Magdalena will explain it more in details. But this is just a list of the EFSD Plus guarantees for the Western Balkans, which are relevant for energy transition proposals. Next slide, please. Yes, this is the current call that we have under WBIF, and as I mentioned, next operational board meeting in June will approve additional projects in the energy sector. What is important for you is probably how these proposals reach us and reach the WBIF is through the NEPAC, the national IPA coordinators. They are the ones who are submitting to WBIF their project proposals, usually once a year or twice a year, depending on how many calls we launch. But then these proposals are discussed through different formats and the different stakeholders. And at the end of the day, for the mature ones and for the eligible ones, there is an endorsement foreseen by the WBIF board. And this was very quickly on WBIF, but as I mentioned, we have other support programs as well. Please, next slide. Which are outside of WBIF, and these are just the examples of the proposed programs I mentioned. There is the EU for Green, EU for Energy Transition. This is the Covenant of Mayor, where IPA funds support also the Western Balkans beneficiaries. And then there is also, of course, the Core Regions in Transition initiative, in the framework of which we also have now this workshop and the Learning Academy. Next slide, please. And I think I will be in 30 minutes too. So EU for Green is a 10 million technical assistance project, which is implemented by the Austrian Environment Agency, and the Austrian Environment Agency also contributes with an additional 1 million. The outcomes are on the screen. The idea with this technical assistance, which launched in 2021, is to have the implementation of the green agenda for the Western Balkans, this strategy document, which was approved in 2020. This is a 3 years program, so it's already ongoing, and we still have a couple of years to implement this. And finally, next slide, this is the Covenant of Mayors. In addition, another regional programs where the Western Balkans beneficiaries can have EU funding, and this is also around 10 million EU grant for a duration of 4 years, and this is implemented by the GIZ and other partners. And on the next slide, you will see a couple of small project examples that were financed under the Covenant of Mayor. There was roof insulation on a cultural center in Berane, photovoltaic to supply water pumps. These are smaller projects. It's outside of WBIF. In WBIF, we have the big infrastructure investments, and this is a smaller scale projects here. But this is also a channel through which we finance the just transition. And this was very quickly from my side. I think it was a bit quick, but you will receive the presentation afterwards, and then you will have time to look at it and read about it more in details. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Judith. Yes, of course. I mean, the work that you do, it's so vast and big. It cannot fit even, I think, in an hour presentation. But thank you so much for the overview of what you are doing and what kind of projects you are financing. We'll talk in more details during the Q&A session. Now I will go to Magdalena Kuneva. She's also from DG NEAR. She's the team leader for Green and Sustainable Finance unit for IFIs and investments, or blended finance and EU guarantees. And you already got a sneak peek. She will be discussing about the European Fund for Sustainable Development Plus guarantees. And yeah, that's it from my side. Magdalena, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Sonia. So maybe we move directly to the next slide, and I will answer the question I received about, there was a question on the chat, what about green investments in Ukraine? So just to start first and give a general context, general background. First of all, why do we do financial instruments? Judith spoke about blending under WBF and the new instrument, the budgetary guarantee under the European Fund for Sustainable Development Plus. But the background to this is that official development assistance is not sufficient to cover the investment needs for the green agenda. Here on the slide, you see annual investment needs for the SDGs and the current annual investment gap, which was estimated to be 2.5 billion, but this was before even this was the 2.5 trillion of USD annual average was before COVID-19. So these estimates now have only increased, which means that to fill this gap, additional mobilization of resources is required, both from the public and the private sector, and we can't just rely on the traditional grants. With this background in mind, if you could move on to the next slide. There is a new instrument, and the new instrument is available globally. It's available for all partner countries in which DG works, including, of course, very importantly, Western Balkans. But there was a question about Ukraine. Yes, also Ukraine is eligible under this instrument. This is a budgetary guarantee instrument, and it is meant to support three overarching objectives, and the most important for us today is Green Deal, but also Global Gateway Strategy and the Jobs and Inclusive Growth Agenda. And this is done by dividing or designing several windows under which operations are supported. So here you see the windows. For us, what's important is the connectivity window, under which we have energy and the energy transition agenda. But I think when we talk about energy transition, obviously it's a cross-cutting topic. So it's also linked to MSME finance, especially the green SMEs. It's linked to investments in sustainable cities and also water, biodiversity, and sustainable finance. Sustainable finance is in particular a new topic, and I will speak a bit more about it. If you could move on. So if you have now the general understanding as to what kind of investments this instrument would support, but in terms of how it actually works, this is based on the multi-annual financial framework currently available until 2027. And under this, there is external action guarantee. So this is for all the operations outside the EU, for which there is a coverage from the EU budget. And the coverage is for two type of, if I could say, two type of operations. First, you have dedicated financing through the European Investment Bank. And then secondly, you have something we call open architecture. It's a bit of a jargon, but what it means in reality is that we work with a variety of development finance institutions, multilateral development banks, and also some specialized fund managers to implement this new instrument, budgetary guarantee, or also known as CFSD Plus guarantee. And today I want to focus on the open architecture because it is, first of all, sizable in terms of amounts. As you can see on the slide, about 13 billion euro have been dedicated to this instrument, but also because it is implemented through all this variety of partners, and it aims to crowd in additional finance. I will illustrate this on the next slide. So the way this works is through different types of operations. If the operations are sovereign loans, so they are provided directly to the state or through energy utility, for instance, with a sovereign guarantee. This is usually done for public infrastructure projects, large infrastructure, This is done through this exclusive mandate that I mentioned for the European Investment Bank. However, what's interesting for us is that there is an increasing amount of operations which are done directly with utilities without requiring a sovereign guarantee, and that allows it, that reduces basically the burden also on the country's budgets and creates more fiscal space for the countries. For instance, this could be financing to public water sanitation companies or energy utilities, as I mentioned. It can be also linked to upgrading energy infrastructure in the country. It can be also linked to direct operations with the private sector, not just through commercial banks, but also through direct investments in projects, for instance, renewable energy projects. So this is supported under this open architecture budgetary guarantees. And if you move on, I will explain where we currently are. So the budgetary guarantees that I'm describing are a complementary tool. So just think of them as one additional tool in the toolbox of the EU. So we still need blending grants, we still need technical assistance, we still need traditional grants. But in addition to that, the guarantees are available. And the way they work is they're implementing partners, as I mentioned, usually development finance institutions that make proposals based on these investment windows that I mentioned, including for energy. And on this basis, guarantee programs are selected. So currently we have over 60 such guarantee programs, which have been already approved for a total of around 8.4 billion guarantee allocations across all regions, so not just indigenous year. And we might endorse additional programs in the future. In our regions, including Western Balkans, including Ukraine, we have 27 such guarantee programs, which have been recently endorsed. And they will be, out of these 27, 16 will be implemented mainly in these regions, in our regions, coming to around 2.4 billion guarantee allocation. And this is expected to mobilize around 17 billion in priority sectors, including renewable energy, which we're discussing today, to deliver especially on the flagships in the economic and investment plans. And with these guarantee instruments, the EU is able to de-risk a broad range of investments. This could include direct loans, as I mentioned, in projects, for instance, renewable energy projects. It could be credit lines to local financial institutions for on lending to SMEs or to smaller scale, for instance, investments in energy efficiency were mentioned. It could be also linked to project financing, for instance, linked to municipal infrastructure. So broad range of financial instruments. It could be debt, it could be equity, it could be direct financing, it could be through financial intermediaries. There is a range of opportunity there, and also the timelines are also very long. It depends on the underlying operation and the instrument that would be supported. But overall, a guarantee could support the project if it's direct lending up to 18 years. So as you can see, long duration, which allows financing to be extended on very attractive terms. And I just want to give some examples in the next slide. These are, when we speak about green and sustainable investments in this current call that I just mentioned with the 6 windows, there are several topics that come to mind that have generated most guarantee programs. And I just want to summarize them in this slide. It's not that these are all the topics, but if I'm to speak about the overarching themes that will be supported using the guarantee instruments, these are the themes. First of all, I mentioned green investments in cities, and this ranges from energy, clean energy, to water, transport, finance, green finance. And we have several such guarantee programs with partners such as KfW, AFD, and a specialized fund called Urban Water Catalyst Fund. Secondly, a very significant topic for us, also part of the energy package for Western Balkans, is investments in renewable energy and new climate technologies. And we have again several programs. There is a program with EBRD, significant engagement with KfW for supporting market-oriented green transformation both in Western Balkans countries, but also in the Eastern Partnership countries, and also focus on green SMEs and sustainable value chains. And we see a lot of interest around sustainability and developing value chains, and not just the credit lines, the more traditional products for SMEs. And a new instrument for us, I mentioned this investments in green and sustainable bonds. We have a global green bond in Europe initiative that could also provide credit enhancements linked to green and sustainable bonds. A topic which is increasing in importance and attention is investments in nature and biodiversity. It's a growing attention topic. We still don't have so many operations under this team, but we expect this to increase in the future. And overall, there are a number of programs which are aimed at climate action, both mitigation and adaptation. If you move on very concretely with few examples as to what kind of actual operations can be supported with the guarantees under the different programs that I just mentioned. When it comes to cities, as I mentioned, it could be wastewater treatment, it could be solid waste, for instance, it could be clean energy linked to city infrastructure. I think there is significant interest also in sustainable mobilities in cities. It could be also green credit lines to local financial institutions for SMEs finance linked to urban development. I think probably what is interesting here is how EFSD Plus will support the energy transition. As I mentioned, we have significant focus on programs that can de-risk investments in larger renewable energy projects to meet countries' renewable energy targets. So we're talking about utility scale generation projects, but also very importantly investments that could reinforce grids and network infrastructure. We also have a significant pipeline in new technologies, new climate technologies. They still involve high technology risks, but there is also interest in developing these value chains. This is linked to renewable hydrogen or derivatives like green ammonia, also energy storage, some of the underdeveloped renewable energy technologies such as, for instance, floating PV. And we see interest in low carbon materials, and this is also linked to CBAM. One example is green cement and green feedstocks. I mentioned e-mobility technologies, but also e-mobility business models, including battery recycling. They can be supported. These are the kind of operations that can be de-risked using the guarantees, and as a result also mobilize additional private sector financing for them. I mentioned the capital market instruments, and in some countries green bonds are already known, but I mean, there is also a lot of opportunity to expand the use of green and sustainable bonds to finance and close infrastructure gaps and mobilize additional sources of finance which are currently not available, basically utilizing capital markets. As a cross-cutting teams, green investments in buildings and commercial and decarbonization in the commercial industrial sectors, sustainable logistics. These are all topics that could be de-risked, so operations that could be financed using the EFSD Plus guarantees. I mentioned also a growing importance of biodiversity and nature. So this is some of the examples. This is not an exhaustive list, but just to give you a bit of a taste as to how the guarantees can be used practically in the countries. And we expect, we are currently finalizing guarantee agreements. We expect implementation to start already from next year, so to have first operations covered already from 2024, and we expect until 2026 to have a number of these projects to be financed and de-risked using the guarantees. And as I mentioned, the duration of the actual investments could continue up to 18 years. It could be 15 years for credit lines, 18 years for direct investments, so a long duration of the actual operations. I'll stop here and I'm available for questions.
Thank you, Magdalena. That was really comprehensive. The de-risking program sounds really interesting, and I think can be quite beneficial for the region, and especially I would say when you go down the regional and city level. We'll come back to some of the questions later on. And now, of course, last but not least, we have an actual practical example. Dr. Zsuzsa Piskoti-Kovacs is working for the Hungarian Co-Commission Secretariat as the head of the unit. And she has a 13-year experience in research, active in the field of just transition. And particularly the Co-Commission that she leads has the first circle membership in the stakeholder strategy working group of the Just Transition platform. So I believe like she's very well positioned to actually tell us more regarding the financing of just transition and the North Hungary experience when it comes to that. So yeah, Zsuzsa, the floor is yours.
Thank you so much. Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for the introduction. I'm happy to be here with you today. And thanks for the Secretariat for the kind invitation. The main objective of my presentation is to provide some insights about the financial side of the just transition in the Northern Hungarian region from a local perspective. And I would like to put special emphasis on sharing the practical experiences. Firstly, I would like to briefly demonstrate our core region. Then I'm going to share some information about the Life Integrated North Transfer project, focusing on its financial aspects. And the main part of the presentation will be about the practical experience, which I gathered during the development of proposals relating to the topic of just transition. I hope that my presentation would provide some inspiration and tips to you on how to raise funds for implementing the just transition in your region. Next slide, please. So in general, you have to know that 3 countries are eligible for Just Transition Fund in Hungary. It is our 250 million in case of Hungary. Now I'm focusing on the Northern Hungarian core region, which consists of 2 countries, Heves and Vas-Bolyai-Zemplén. These are rural areas which are characterized by a low unemployment rate. We have open pit mines, lignite mines, and the Heves County hosts the Mátra power plant. And this power plant is responsible for the 50% of the greenhouse gas emission of the Hungarian energy sector. It has a great role in the region's labor market, and the economic performance, 25% of the economic performance of this dangerous district comes from the Mátra power plant. Next slide, please. And how did I get in touch with the Just Transition in Hungary? The answer is the Life Integrated project, which was launched in 2020. This project supports the implementation of the Hungarian National Energy and Climate Plan. The Ministry of Energy is the coordinator, and all key actors I can see are on the board. The Mátra power plant, the relevant chambers, state unions, key municipalities, NGOs. The Eszterházy Catholic University, where I am working, is the only university in the partnership. And our university and personally, I joined the team working on the Just Transition in Hungary by this project. On this slide, you can see a graph, is any kind of timeline. And you have to know about the financial background of the project, that the 60% of the fund is provided by the European Union, and I can see that we are in a very favorable situation because the national co-finance rate, the 40% is provided by the Hungarian government. The Hungarian government strives to promote the participation of Hungarian organizations in such projects like Life Integrated project by providing this fantastic opportunity. So in this figure, you can see that the project is divided into 4 phases from financial aspect. The financial transfer from the side of the EU is connected to these 4 phases. And the figure shows, so under the timeline, you can see that the national co-financing is paid annually. So due to the different schedule of inflow from the two resources, it is worth to have a proper liquidity plan. It is not mandatory, but helps to plan the implementation of your project. The annual payment of national funds could cause some liquidity challenges, of course, but I would say that nobody should complain about this situation, about our Hungarians like complaining, but we are in a very lucky situation that we have such a support from the central government. Next slide, please. So I don't want to go into the details with the activities of the project because we are running out of time, but I would like to show you a figure which shows the core concept, the essence of the project, I can say. This figure represents the catalysator function of the project. In practice, it means that in the internal circle, you can see the key activities which are implemented in the framework of the LIFE project, while in the external circle, you can see the complementary funds, which could be achievable due to the work carried out by the LIFE project. And this is the point when I would like to talk about that why complementary funds are necessary. I would like to provide 3 arguments why we need this. I mentioned that Hungary will receive 250 million euros from the GTF. You know that it will support activities which manage the socio-economic consequences of the coal phase-out. It is a fantastic opportunity for you core regions, but this amount will cover just one part of the needs. So this is the reason why we should find the optimal financial mix to finance the green transition. Secondly, it is an important thing that I would like to emphasize, the significance of international cooperations. The just transition is a new opportunity for core regions, but due to its novelty, it is the trial phase for all of us. This is the reason why international cooperations, mutual learning, sharing knowledge would be essential to cope with these challenges. The national GTF doesn't really demand international cooperations. So this is the reason why it is necessary to find other opportunities as well. Another issue is why complementary funds are necessary is the nature of the green transition in itself. It has a lot of aspects involving technical investments, which couldn't be financed by Just Transition Fund. So you have to find the finance source for these activities as well. If you have take a look at the figure, I would like to highlight only one important element from the internal circle. You can see that in the framework of the LIFE project, we had the opportunity to build the human capacity in the region. I guess that is essential from the aspect of fundraising activities. You can be more effective if you have a dedicated team which has the appropriate knowledge and competencies. So in the framework of this LIFE project, we had opportunity to establish the Coal Commission Secretariat at the local university. Next slide, please. So after providing some insights about the LIFE project, I would like to share some practices on how we develop project proposals at the Coal Commission Secretariat. The first step to find the project idea. So based on my experiences, the first crucial step is to identify the needs of the region. I consider this step crucial because if you determine the needs from the office based on some desktop research, in most cases it is not enough to make the project quite attractive for the potential partners. This is my experience. The well-established need is essential if you want to avoid working for the growers. Second step is to find a proper call which could support your idea. It is important to read the call carefully, mainly if you want to be a coordinator, because the partners will ask you, and you must be aware of the green rules. The call determines the potential partners, the eligible activities, which is essential for planning the project activities. In most cases, we use the funding and tenders portal to find proposals, but we are following the calls of different Interregs, Central Europe, Danube, and other cross-border cooperations. But I would like to mention here that relating to the Interreg proposals, we are in a good situation because for the recent financial period, the national co-financing rate is 15 and 20% for central budget bodies. So it is a fantastic opportunity why the Hungarian government encourages the Hungarian organizations to participate in these international projects. So, but besides these large and very well-known costs, I have to mention the opportunities which you can find in LinkedIn using your own network. Nowadays, I can notice some small-scale projects which with a tiny budget, but it could really help to start to build something new. Step three. When you have a good idea in your hands and you are aware of which cause supports your initiative, you are able to draft your concept note. Use this for finding the partners. It is important to involve the main objective, the potential responsibilities of the partners. And it is always a controversial topic, because the most important question relating to this, that how much information is worth to share. I'm pretty sure that I'm sometimes naive, I know, but I think that you have to provide all key information in order to be attractive for the partners. If you have a concept note in your hands, you can start the partner research, which is the fourth step. So this is another crucial point, similar to the first step. The appropriate partners who could support your idea, because in most cases the cooperation depends on person. This is my personal experience. I have some experience in so-called cold reaching out, which means that you don't have a direct contact to each other, and it is a quite challenging way to develop proposals. And this is the point when I would like to mention different technical assistances which provided a nice opportunity for us for expanding our professional network. Next slide, please. So the main question relating to this step, how to find reliable partners. I underlined the reliable word because it is the hardest part, I can say that. And what is in the background? According to my experience, everybody is busy. There are many people who don't want to invest energy to write a proposal if the success is not guaranteed. This is only, of course, my personal opinion, and I can understand this attitude. But I believe in cooperation, and I experience that there are committed people on the ground who really want to create something new, something for his region. So you need to find these people. And how we did it. In 2021, the Exchange EU call was launched, which facilitated to build connections with other core regions. When I expressed that I want to submit an application, I talked about it with my colleagues. Most people said that why do you invest energy in such a thing, because you won't get any money for this. But I'm thinking in a totally different way. I consider these as opportunities where you can build nice cooperations and you can find the trustworthy partners. This is the reason why we were very active in the Exchange EU, but we use the Erasmus Plus calls for this purpose as well. So during the development of the consortium partnership, the complementary is essential. This is another issue that you have to take, you have to keep in mind when you are developing a consortium. We need partners with different competencies, and the cooperation could create an added value. And the last slide, please. Yes, before, this is not the last, but just a summary. And if you do this step by step, you can develop the proposal and submit it. And thank you. So, and what are the lessons what I learned and maybe the giveaways? First of all, when we begin to play on this playground, I can see that we have to be aware that it is quite different from national funds. So, for instance, Horizon, Interreg, and LifePulse, because there is a large competition, there are strong players with huge lobby force. This is the reason why you have to know that it is very hard to win, and you have to appreciate all little success. When our proposal is rejected, I strive to see the bright side of the story. But I can see that I have an evaluation in my hand, which shows me the way it can be considered as any kind of guidance on how to improve the proposal. I know that it would be easier to wait for national funds, but the impact you could reach with international cooperation is even larger. In our region, we are responsible for managing, engaging the stakeholders. And I can say that based on these activities, the stakeholders of the just transition consider this as a long process. And if you develop proposals involving them into this game, it could be considered as a tool to keep their attention. And just some summary sentences. It is worth to monitor always the needs of the economy and your community, and invest time and energy to develop your professional networks. And the last and maybe the secret component, it is nice to have the lobby side of the story. Thank you so much for your kind attention.
Thank you so much, Usha. It's great to hear a personal experience as well of, I would say, the challenges of getting the right support, but not only financial, but also different technical assistance, but also human support in transforming, I would say, the economy and the region from depending on one resource to something completely different. We'll go now to the questions. We're a bit out of time, but still there were some interesting questions, and one was specifically about the WBIF program and whether it supports only public or does it also support the private sector as well. So I believe Judith, you can answer this question if you would like. Sorry, we cannot hear you. I'm not sure what has happened, but I can't.
Okay, sorry.
No worries, thank you.
So yes, as I mentioned in the previous MFF, the focus was on public sector blending. But we introduced the private sector projects also under WBIF, and most recently with the guarantees, of course, the idea is to leverage more and more private sector financing and not just the classical public blending when we have a loan and then we have the public authorities who are basically on the other side of the loan. So now exactly the idea of the EFSD Plus and the new Western Balkans guarantee facilities is to leverage private investments as well. The infrastructure financing, the big infrastructures is mostly with public sector at the moment, but of course it depends on the type of the infrastructure project, whether it is also interesting for private sectors to come in. For example, renewable energy projects for decarbonization, of course, they are revenue generating, so less grant need is, they have less grant is needed to implement those projects, and those projects are probably more better suited for a guarantee instrument. But there are other projects which will never be implemented without grant support. So there is this delineation.
Thank you. And I might jump into the second question, which, yeah, it will address to you again. Regarding the Just Transition Fund specifically, is this something that you're discussing in DigiNear, also with the WBIF or the IEB, EBRD, some of the other lenders, development banks, etc., and of course the Commission itself. So yeah, I know that this is a probably recurring question that you hear all the time, but it will be good to maybe address it again regarding a specific Just Transition Fund just for the region of Western Balkans and Ukraine, of course.
Well, this is something which on the short run, it's not in the pipeline. And in short run, I mean upcoming financing year for sure, because first we want to really start with and continue with the technical assistance for Just Transition in the region. And then in the future, there might be a possibility for that. But of course, the Commission comitology, fund comitology works in a way that in the longer term perspective, we have to do some strategic discussions and reflections before, also concerning the next MFF, because this MFF is also more or less programmed, or at least yes, the main objectives are already set. But yes, I heard also discussions about it, but not short run for sure.
Thank you so much. Yes, of course. I mean, having a specific dedicated funding, probably something that the countries are quite interested in, because it's like for this specific thing as well. But of course, there is already, I would say, a lot of things out there that need to be considered as well, and also like for the countries themselves to show initiative and to check what they are eligible for as well, because you were discussing as well and your colleagues that it's not only infrastructure, not only like big infrastructure projects like solar or wind, but it's also like new net zero technologies like hydrogen as well, etc. So there are like a lot of options out there that they can look into. So I will stop here because we are already out of time. I want to say thank you to our great panelists today, Magdalena, Judith, and Shusha, for the great, I would say, presentation. I know it's a very, very tough topic and not easy to follow. So thank you so much for like really putting it very much concretely in a very short time. All the presentations will be sent to everyone as well, so you can check in peace later as well what the panelists were talking about. Thank you to the audience, thank you to the questions, thank you to the organizers, the great colleagues, Victoria, Irina, Leila from the Secretariat, and we will meet again on the 14th of June, same time, so 3 p.m. Central Eastern European time, and then we'll explore how the regions are seizing the coal phase-out as an opportunity for economic development, and the last webinar after that will be the lessons learned from switching from coal to renewables. So yes, thank you again. Have a great afternoon and see you all very soon. Bye.